our series, we have Adrienne Huffman, a managing member of NICOLE by Design. Thank you, Adrienne, so much for joining us today. We're so grateful to have you, and I'm really excited to learn more about you and to hear about your story. And I know our scholars are, anticipating this session as well. So once again, thank you. We're glad to have you on. And now I will give you the mic and hand it over to you. Tell your story.
Thank you so much, and I'm so happy to be here. So let's get started. Okay, as you all know now, my name is Adrienne Huffman, and I am the managing member of A Nicole by Design LLC, which is a creative services provider. And I'm here to talk to you a bit about my journey into technology and a collision with the arts, which is very important to me, and I hope to you as well. So let's get started. My journey begins with one word: design. I have a love for it, and I've had a love for it ever since I could remember. And it started when my grandmother taught me how to sew. That led me to want to become a fashion designer. As I was drawing different clothes and sewing, I also was drawing homes. And when I decided that maybe I don't want to be a fashion designer anymore, I found my love for design through those drawings that I would create, those sketches I would create that are very much like the ones you see here. Well, that led me to wanting to pursue architecture and civil engineering, and that was awesome. So the interesting thing though, around the same time, my dad was introducing me to computers and how to build them. So I found a love for design through that too. And so interestingly enough, while I was in high school, I had the opportunity to shadow someone who was an architect, as well as listen to a couple who were architects during a career day in school. And I'm happy I had those opportunities because that taught me at that time, maybe this isn't the route that I want to take. And so that left me with a little bit of a mini crisis, my junior year of high school specifically. What do I want to pursue when I go to college? What do I want to pursue as a career for life? Such a big thing to think about at that time. And taking a step back, it's awesome to have that curiosity, I think, but don't necessarily put that stuff that pressure on yourself too, and leading to a mini crisis. I'm happy my mother was there to help me out and talking through different options, and she actually introduced me to the idea of computer engineering as a career. And so I did some research. I looked it up and learned I actually liked electrical engineering as well. So my journey into becoming an engineer began with that conversation with my mom. And actually, prior to that, my dad actually helping me learn how to build computers, the different parts of it. And so, out of those things, I created a short term and a long term plan for myself. That started with my attending Florida A&M University for undergraduate degrees in electrical and computer engineering. While there, I learned that math, science, and programming classes were extremely critical to the path that I was taking. And so I definitely dived into those as deep as I could. But that allowed me to also obtain paid summer internships, which were awesome. The experiences I had with the companies that I was able to intern with were amazing. Not only because I got a chance to meet new people, but because I got to learn some new things. I got a chance to apply those things that I was learning in class into those projects that I may have been working on as an intern, and alternatively, learn about some different things that maybe I would not have necessarily learned about in the classroom. So at this time, I was also active in organizations such as the National Society of Black Engineers, which was great exposure at that time to even more engineers and engineering, and just having a network and a family of friends and connections who were going down that same path. Now, I mentioned before that I created a short term and a long term plan. Well, part of that plan was to pursue a master's degree. And so I ended up attending Iowa State University, where I majored in electrical engineering. Now, this was pretty awesome because at that time I got to focus on wireless technology, which is something that I absolutely love. I got a chance to find that out as I was doing research from different classes and ultimately decided that was the path I wanted to take for a career. Now, interestingly enough, during these summer internships that I mentioned before, I had the opportunity to work primarily with software. You'll still need to do that a bit with wireless, but it was different types of systems that I was working with other than wireless. And so, one great thing that happened out of this was an internship with Apple, where for the first time I had the opportunity to get exposure to the world of hardware engineering as it pertained to wireless technology. So, my first summer at Apple, I had an opportunity to work on this, which is the Airport Extreme. It is a wireless router that is amazing. I absolutely love it. And can I tell you, this Ethernet section on the back is everything. And part of that is because I had an opportunity to work on it. An amazing experience learning more about what hardware engineers did and do. So I'm sure you're asking, what do they do? So let's take a look at something. Have you ever opened up a device, some type of equipment, and happen to see a board inside of it that has squiggly lines? It has some different parts on it that maybe we don't know what it is. They look like they're randomly placed, but somehow, if you connected power to it, this device works. Well, let me tell you. This board is actually called a printed circuit board, or also known as a PCB. And those components that you see on the inside, or the little parts, those are little components that, when soldered or connected to this board, with the squiggly lines that you see, those are actually electrical traces of copper. So, or traces of copper that allow these components to communicate together electrically. And so piecing these things together is very interesting concept. So as a hardware engineer, what I had the opportunity to do was pick the components for the design that was being constructed, actually place these components, design how they would actually speak together, or actually piece them together to make sure that they would talk together in a way that they needed to. And then also test it out to make sure that the signals work, that there was no interference or with the connections that were made. And so if you think about this from a high level, it's a lot like connect the dots, where you have a lot of instructions that you have to follow to make sure that your lines and connections don't break. And so I know that you all receive STEM boards. I actually got one myself. And so I hope that you take the opportunity to take a look at these, actually build your backup sensor to get a feel for what hardware design and engineering may actually be like for you. It's great to be able to actually make these different connections. I think 'cause I like to construct things. And so I think that's a great opportunity for you to explore that path. And so for me, that was a life changing path because I figured that I really like this. But let me tell you, let's go back. I told you that I had a plan, and part of that plan was to actually pursue a PhD. So after I left my internship, I actually did receive a job offer, and I was left with a question of, should I pursue a PhD or should I go work? It was a hard decision to make, but a great decision to make, with both paths actually ending up at I believe, equally satisfying experiences. But ultimately, I decided to pursue working for Apple, which allowed me the opportunity to work on a number of products, which I absolutely loved working on. Those included Apple TV as well as airport products. And to be able to walk into a store and actually see something that I've worked on and worked with, ready for the world to consume and affect them in a positive way, is absolutely amazing. Absolutely love it. And it brings great satisfaction to know that I had a hand in doing that. This opportunity also allowed me to, working for Apple actually also allowed me to meet some incredible people, travel, which is something that I absolutely love to do, as well as some experiences that I otherwise would not have had. And so I can say a journey in this direction is something I would definitely do again if I had the opportunity to do it again, or if I had to repeat. Let's say that. And so, interesting enough, you remember I said I like to build things, right? I love working with my hands. I love being creative. And I also had a desire to be an entrepreneur, which led me to establishing A Nicole by Design LLC, which is where I believe passion for creativity lives. So here, what I get a chance to do is watch the left brain or experience the left brain and the right brain collide. So I have the opportunity to actually interact with clients who would like to have a website designed and built out, but I also have the opportunity of creating content for special events. So, for example, customized 3D centerpieces, um, invitations that have some very unique design elements to them, and even custom packaging. These items that you see here are all items that I imagined up and actually created by hand. I had the opportunity to design those out, actually construct the method for which it would actually be created, and then actually execute on it, which I believe working within the technology field, actually having that background also assisted me in actually having a good understanding of what I could do to actually make these pieces work together. And it's great to know that I also have the satisfaction of working with clients to build out websites, content, go into coding. It's also exciting and so much fun. A lot. And so that is my path, that's my journey. And what I want to leave with you is a word for the day: be. Be an explorer. For me, if I did not take the opportunity to explore different paths, if I didn't allow myself to be curious in that way, I can't say that I actually would have had the opportunity to end up at the point that I am now. Be flexible. We can always have a plan, but allow yourself to actually have the opportunity to be flexible in the directions that that plan can actually take you. And if you get to a point where you're saying, this thing that I want to follow is awesome, but this other opportunity is great, take the time to be flexible to actually navigate and see which direction you want to actually take and possibly take it. If I had not done that, if I had not been flexible in taking a opportunity to learn more about hardware, I would not have been able to share the story with you today that I've shared about my time and experience at Apple, which ultimately led me to the path that I am now as being an entrepreneur. And finally, be brave in pursuing your dream. This is especially important. For me, that actually fell back to leaving a full time corporate job to explore a dream of being an entrepreneur in a creative space. And it's something that is amazing, but it also took some bravery. And I would love for that to be for you. Be brave in pursuing your dreams. Don't let any fear or any type of anything that may seem scary actually keep you from pursuing. And so, with that, I will end my talk. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrienne. That was a wonderful session. I love to hear about your story and following your dreams and your passions, and then eventually pursuing that with your design company. So thank you for sharing that. So a few questions that I'll ask. So what do you think throughout this entire process of your education, of these internships and everything, what do you think your biggest challenges were and how did you overcome them?
One of my biggest challenges, that's a very good question. I think one of my biggest challenges may have been some of the fear that actually took place. And that's where I find it important to be brave. There were times where I was very fearful about maybe traveling to California for an internship, not necessarily wanting to leave my family.
Yeah.
And this was, as an undergrad. or even being fearful about a class that seemed particularly hard. And so overcoming that fear was something that was major, actually having to push past it to make sure that I could achieve the goal that was set.
Right, turning your fear into bravery. That's great. I love that. So a lot of our scholars are like around middle school age.
Mhm.
So what's some advice that you would give to your younger self? Maybe before you started pursuing those hard classes, or before you started pursuing those things that were really fearful for you.
For my younger self, I would say explore more. And what I mean by that is at the time, one of the things that I learned, and I will say my dad actually taught me how to build computers when I was in middle school. So that was great. I had the opportunity to try different projects out. But I think one of the things I would have loved to do is actually go even further and learn a little bit more about what those things I was doing actually, what they meant, what it meant to actually piece together different parts. So funny story or interesting story, my dad actually helped me with building a project in seventh grade,
Okay.
or it may have been eighth grade. And we had a big science project come up. I wanted to actually go above and beyond. And ended up finding this project he did when he was in school at building a radio. And
Hmm.
so I was able to construct the same type of radio that he was able to construct. It was very basic, very bare. And at least I could get some white noise over it. I didn't actually hear audible tones. I heard, well, where someone may have been speaking, right? But I did hear white noise. But if I had taken an extra step just to learn a little bit more about what some of those connections I was trying to make actually meant, I think maybe I would have had the opportunity to actually hear some of the voices that were coming over well, were expected to come over the radio.
Okay.
So I would say just if you're interested in something, continue to try to challenge yourself to learn more about it.
So getting some more questions flooding in from scholars. Um,
Okay.
so one is, did you ever stop designing dresses and other clothes? So I guess they're asking, like, do you still design clothing?
So I don't necessarily design. I may have sketched a few things, but I've not actually created them. I still have a sewing machine though, and I have patterns. I'll break it out. We know as the pandemic was hitting, there was a need for masks. So I actually pulled out my machine and I took the opportunity to make some masks that I ended up sending back to some family members who work in the medical field. And so actually it's
Awesome.
something that I could actually use right now. So I still actually pull it out sometimes and actually take the time to actually design something like a mask. But it's not as much as it used would have been as my younger self.
Yeah, I think some of our scholars are interested in fashion, but that's good. Um,
There's a lot of great things you could do in fashion. 3D printing is something that's amazing too. There are things
you can do
happening
that
within
with
the fashion
clothes.
industry. So I've actually seen 3D printed shoes. Like I think I came across something where it's like 3D printed shoes. And so
Wow.
to see something like that, I'm like, whoa, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Now
that's
I
really
don't know if
cool.
I would walk in them, but they look really cool.
Wow, I didn't know they could do that.
Mhm.
Um, so let's see here, trying to look through these questions. Okay, what is one of your favorite projects that you created and are like, and you're really, really proud of it?
Okay, so one of my favorites, um, this is the picture that you saw of the centerpiece. That was one of my favorites, the Tuskegee centerpiece.
Yeah,
So
that was beautiful.
I thank you. I had this idea of crafting something that was 3D, where you could actually see the face of the university's logo on each side. And to think about how in the world do you build this thing? That was really an interesting process to go by. But I had to go through like one or two prototypes before it actually made it. And I think it was really primarily one. But it worked so well to actually piece it together. So to think through the process of drawing this out, sketching out what I wanted to see, actually creating the pieces for it and then building it together or piecing it together, that was really fulfilling. I will say there are a number of other projects that I've worked on that I absolutely enjoyed. There's another when I worked at Apple that was one of my favorites too. So
Yeah.
working on one of the airport devices, that was an amazing experience as well. I learned a lot, and I think what I find is if I'm learning a lot with a project I'm working on, that's absolutely one of my favorites when I can actually go into it deeper.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was looking at that centerpiece and I was kind of like, okay, how did she kind of piece it together like that? But it looks really good and like it's strong, like
And it
it's
was
not.
really stable. It's
Yeah,
all out of paper too. That's the funny thing.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
So we kind of talked about like having fear and being brave and pushing through that. So
Mhm.
a scholar is asking, how did you reassure yourself in those times when you had to make a hard decision? Maybe like what are some tips you have for students or scholars who are trying to decide about their career or decide about their academic life?
One thing I would say is think about the alternative to the fear. What would happen if you weren't afraid? To just keep that end goal in sight to try to get over it, because fear is an emotional feeling
Mm,
that if you can suppress it and just push past it, you'll see so many things beyond that that you could only have imagined of. And so for me, part of that process was looking at the alternative. What does this look like if I'm able to actually push past it? The other
yeah,
thing is, also thought about if I decided not to do this, would I regret it? Because I was afraid to tackle it. And that's one of the things I did not want to have to cope with, because that's another feeling that's not necessarily the best one to have, regret. The other thing,
mm,
a person of faith, so I would pray about it a lot too. And so that's very critical for me. And so those elements together allowed me to overcome a number of fears that I've had.
thank you for that. That was
You're
great.
welcome.
And I kind of saw throughout your presentation, this is kind of a question like from me, through your presentation that you had in caps paid
Yes,
internship. How do
yes.
you feel about like the difference between paid and unpaid internships? What's your position on that? I'm just curious.
Um, I think overall, an opportunity is an opportunity. I would say the preference is if you can get paid for an internship, definitely do it, even if it's a small amount.
Hmm.
That I think helps, um, and really that target that of what you're doing. It to some degree creates an accountability. Whereas the unpaid, it's like, well, I'm not getting paid for it anyway, so
Yeah, it's kind of more like
that's
volunteer.
exactly. And so it depends on what your approach is. I won't knock unpaid internships. Um, some paid internships might not be the best either. Maybe there are some unpaid internships where you may actually end up learning more. Um, but I do believe that paid internships to some degree create a level of accountability that maybe one may not have with an unpaid. But again, it all goes down to an experience is an experience. And if you feel like it's going to be a great experience for you to take or to have, go after it and be
Exactly.
very
I agree.
intentional. Mhm.
Awesome. So we're wrapping up our session soon, but I want to give you the last moment to maybe give, if you have any final words for our scholars or a last little snippet of advice, anything you'd like to say to them before we sign off.
I would like to say one of my favorite quotes is anything you can imagine is real. And I believe Pablo Picasso is the one that um, made that statement, or at least that's a paraphrase of it. But anything you can imagine, if you can imagine it, it can become a reality. And that's my hope for you. If you're imagining yourself as an engineer, please pursue it. If you're imagining yourself as an artist with a tech focus, please pursue it. Um, Whatever you can imagine, make it a reality. And I hope you're imagining some
Yes.
hardware.
The Lingo kits.
Yes. Yes, I
Yeah.
can't wait to actually work with mine. I hadn't had an opportunity to actually build it out yet, but I was looking at the instructions. I was like, oh, this is so amazing. I love
Yeah, it looks so fun, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I want to say thank you once again, Adrienne, for joining us today for our Inspire series. This was a great session, great talk. And thank you, INTech family, parents, and scholars out there watching. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope everyone has a wonderful week and a wonderful day. So thank you, everybody, and have a great week. Thank you.